Good morning. Hi. I think that today is the 27th day of November. I usually check before I get started, but I failed to do so. But let's jump right into it. Busy day. A lot to cover. Some changes also. So this is the Good Life meditation, an exercise that I do to remind myself of my objectives and to review and refine and remodel my principles along the way. So, and also to basically set the day in motion. I usually like to do this before dawn. A little later today, it's almost 10 p.m. But that's okay, I still have a lot of the day ahead of me. And I really find it makes a difference, setting the everything in alignment, reminding myself of why I'm, of the decisions that I make about why I'm here. Because largely it's my, I decide those things. I don't have anybody telling me necessarily other than my government and my wife. That's a whole thing in itself, not being comfortable with being responsible for your own life in a way. Interesting. Anyway, there are begin with the affirmation of human and civil rights. I'm going to go quickly, like I said. I simply do not want to forget about the underrepresented individuals and underrepresented groups in our society. So the individuals and smaller social groups. Repeating myself. So I try to keep them in mind as I make my decisions, especially with regard to my participation in the society as a franchisee, a voting member. Let's move on now to the three objectives. The first of these is the development and maintenance of good, sound principles, because these are the guiding factors in my life that help me to know when to turn left, right, swerve, or back up, or stay still. Second objective is the cultivation of good emotional reactions so that I react well. Am I going to make it on time? React well to the circumstances that are going on in life? I think I will. And make good responses. Not letting myself run away with my emotions. You know what I mean? It's not coming out as clear as I'd like, or as. But let's see if I can get back on it. Maybe it's the rain. It's also the fact that I'm on a tight schedule right now. I'm going to swing by Starbucks anyway. The third objective is the performance of good actions. This is simply doing good things in alignment with my principles. Let's move on now to 13 principles. The first of these is the atomic principle. Everything in the universe is made of atoms, bits and pieces that flow and change and come together for bits of time to be something like you and me. And the thing to keep in mind is that changes, and that something is subject to dissolution. But the pieces that it's made of will be reused elsewhere, and else who. 2, the principle of nature, and the sub-principle of paradigm. Everything in the universe has some particular nature, and it's good to observe the nature of things around us so that we can recognize what they are and respond to them. Like the nature of the driver in the car in front of me is to sit at the ready and attentive to the red light that's in front of both of us, to keep their attention there while also talking to the occupants in the car, and to be ready to move forward when the light turns green. To be a conscientious driver, to not drink and drive, to have a driver's license, to therefore be practiced and authorized to drive, and to be of a relative like mind to me in terms of wanting to get somewhere in a safe and timely manner. That is the nature of the driver in front of me. And but there are also other characteristics of the driver in front of me. They may be a son of a gun. Maybe a real problem maker. Maybe someone who is impatient and doesn't have a lot of control over their emotions and who will cut me off. Who may speed, get in a wreck, cause me and mine to be in danger as well. That's potentially the nature of that person. Now, I don't know exactly what the character, what the nature of it is, but I can infer some things based on the way that I see them driving, and based on my general experience of most drivers. There's probability involved. But I have to keep in mind that those other less positive traits may also be present, and I need to be ready for them and keep my distance and have a more of a guarded manner in driving. Good response accordingly. Likewise, I have a particular nature, and it's worthwhile for me to become familiar with my nature so that I can live in accordance with that. My nature is to walk alone in wild places, to think and sometimes share. The next principle is the principle of maturity, which has two subcomponents, wisdom, two subprinciples, wisdom and fortitude. Maturity is the quality of being mature, the quality of being experienced in life and retaining some understanding of the consequences of our actions and the benefits of due diligence. And it's the way that we live when we keep those things in mind and exercise our lives accordingly. Too many people in that line. No Starbucks for me today. Bummer. Okay, let's just get to work. The next, okay, and then the paradigm. Did I talk about that? I was still in nature, right? Yeah, I think so. Well, if I didn't, let me reverse a bit. The principle of paradigm. It's a sub-principle, paradigm. So everything has a particular nature. I lost it there. I'm going to let that go. Anyway, paradigm is the nature of something along with its operating system for going about doing things, even if it's a conscious operating system or not. It's still there. I kind of got mixed up. And I talked about the social principle, didn't I? No. I'm really all mixed up. Let's come back together again. Atomic principle, principle of nature, now the principle of maturity with the subcomponent, subprinciples of wisdom and fortitude. So I talked about what maturity is. Now, wisdom is that acquired understanding of how the universe really works that we can then use to move through life. Wisdom is something that we typically gain through direct experience. Very few can be taught wisdom. So it's usually something that builds up over time. Fortitude, on the other hand, is our ability, and this can be learned at an early age, the ability to withstand the challenges of life in order to carry on in spite of the challenges. And this is what, for example, like I always like to say, what we teach cadets in military training, to have fortitude so that they can carry on despite their pain, despite their inner conscience telling them, or their inner voice telling them otherwise, to carry on with orders. It's a very powerful thing to be able to do. It's also very controlling in some ways. The real benefit comes when you couple wisdom with fortitude. Maybe that's where the difference is. Yeah, if you just have fortitude, but you don't have wisdom, you can become the pawn of others. Yet if you have both wisdom and fortitude, you are more likely to be your own master. The next is the social principle. Human beings are social animals. We need one another to survive and thrive, and our best ends are social ends. It's very worthwhile to try to do things for the common good. We get a lot of mileage out of that. I'll leave it at that. The next is temperance, the ability to control our consumption in life. Consumption, first and foremost, of goods and services. Alcohol, tobacco, services, whatever services they may be. I don't know, how does that fit in? So consuming bodily consumption and mental consumption, and emotional consumption. We consume, as I said before, commodities, food and drink, and we also consume our emotions. We can let loose and go overboard on either category. And temperance is a powerful thing when we can exercise that in all regards. Having enough, but not so much. Not too much in everything. The next is principle is agency and indifference. Agency is life and the artifacts of life. So everything that lives is an agent, and everything that is produced by living things is an artifact of agency. Especially when that artifact of agency is characteristic of that life. I mentioned in a couple of videos back that oxygen was an artifact of agency because the bacteria that transformed the early Earth's atmosphere into an oxygen-rich atmosphere was a product of it. But in fact, there's really no distinguishing the oxygen produced by bacteria from the oxygen produced by naturally in the universe. So I gotta make some distinction there. I would say more like the artifacts of agency are the things that only that agent could have produced, or another agent could have produced, such as the stump of a tree, the dead stump of a tree, the bird's nest. Ink cloud shot out by an octopus racing away from a diver. Sonar of a whale or dolphin. And of course the clothing of a human being, the automobile that I'm driving in, whatever the case may be. These are all artifacts. And the interesting thing is that we seem to note that agents and our artifacts are everywhere around us. But in fact, that's, from a universal stance, that's not the truth. That's not the case at all. We are the universe is quite devoid of agency, apparently, and the artifacts of agency. We can't find it. We have dedicated scientists looking for that. Nothing so far. But the curious thing is that we live surrounded by it. A lot of us who never venture out into the wild, really wild places, never live without it. So it's like a cocoon in a way. What happens is when we remove agency, or the artifacts of agency, we are left with indifference, which is how the universe really thinks of us. Although thinking about us or feeling about us is flattery, because it doesn't have any of that either. So it's a very frightful thing. It's one of the reasons I have such a hard time going into the wild, even though I really love to go into the indifference. So what we do is, where there is no agent, we invent agents. And we invent, and we ascribe everything in the universe as an artifact of some agent. We call that agent God, and we give God all the characteristics that we'd like in an agent that would give us comfort and would ease our mind. The dangerous thing, of course, is that there's, unless you have good reason to believe that agent is real, you may be just fooling yourself. And where does that bring you? The next is the best seat in the house, which is the perspective on life. And more than just the perspective, it's the being all right with whatever perspective you're in. So not wanting to want to be anyone else, or want to do anything else, or want to be anywhere else. I keep saying that every time, but I like the way that rolls off the tongue. But to be all right with where I am now. I wanted a Starbucks, but oh well. I'm going to be all right just where I am right now. And yet while improving along the way. The next time I go out like this, I'll remember to give myself an extra 5 minutes ahead of time so that I can make sure I get my Starbucks. So improving is not just resting on your laurels, or resting on thorns, when it doesn't go bad. It's just sitting in the mud puddle saying, this is cool. It's really being okay with it, given the options. Well, moving forward anyway. Next is reason, the governing faculty. I used to say the force, but it's not really a force. It's a faculty. Is it a faculty? It is a methodology by which we come to better understand the world, collecting facts, organizing them into arguments, and then observing the universe to see if our arguments are accurate. And if not, then correcting them. And if so, then guardedly holding on to them, tentatively, while seeking to learn more and ready to change our minds at a moment's notice. Well, I shouldn't say at a moment's notice, when good evidence shows that we're wrong. Next is virtue, which is, as I think, as I describe it, the purpose of life. Virtue being the improvement of well-being. And we do that by making decisions and taking actions that improve the well-being of ourselves and other species around us and the environment in general. Clean water, good comprehensive education, improved communication, better health, improved medical care, all these different things. Clean water, did I say that already? All these things improve the well-being of all of us. And I think few would disagree that those are important things, and pursuing them, though we may argue about the details, but in general pursuing them is a worthwhile thing. Next is the path of wildness. It's a way to get unstuck when life, when you find yourself spinning out, your wheels are spinning in life, and take a moment to collect the facts, muster your resolve, and issue forth in the direction of your instinct, your gut, and off you go. Next is these are the two new ones. Risk. Principle of risk. Every decision has rewards and consequences, potential rewards and consequences. And often we look at the rewards and we don't really weigh out the consequences. We do sometimes when we're looking at the direction we want to go, but no, let me say that. I think it's a worthwhile thing to look at the consequences of, and there is a reason I'm calling this risk rather than consequences. Maybe I should call it consequences. What I want to do is I want to remind myself that the decisions that I make have risks, even if they're safe decisions. Even if I'm trying to avoid some risk, I assume other risks. That's starting to get closer to the mark. For example, I get so many young people who write to me and tell me that the life that they want to live, yet for one reason or another, they're not going to do it, either financially, or they're afraid, or they want to wait until some circumstance and condition is met before they can do it. So they hold off, avoiding some risk in the process, while assuming other risks in the process. The risk of stagnating in a path or a life that you didn't really want, of becoming further. Whatever fears you have become reinforced by the fact that you're not exercising strength to go forward, and also the risk that you may just simply die tomorrow or today, having never realized that dream that was important to you. And I think that people look to the benefits that are more tangible and fail to see those risks sometimes. I'll develop this as I go along, and maybe even consider renaming it. I'll see. The next one is Oblivion, which I started to talk about. This is the one I forgot yesterday, but I was going to call it the Long Silent Night. I think that's what it was. But I've changed it to Oblivion. And Oblivion is just a reminder to myself and anyone else that there's no good reason to think that we're going to survive this life, that we're going to survive our death. Every evidence seems to indicate that when it's over, we're done, and we'll never be back. We'll never go on. Kind of lost it there for a second. There appears to be no afterlife. And what's worse is that whatever we are, in terms of memory and even our genetic structure is going to die out too. Interestingly, that our genetics will as well. By 7 generations out, even if you have children, by 7 generations out, your genetic influence on the DNA of the genes of your progeny will be no more different than to a stranger, anyone in the world. So 7 generations out, and it's oblivion to your genes. You're still in there, but you're so dilute that there's no distinguishing you from anyone else on the planet. The only thing that really will remain is whatever ripples you send out, that again are completely anonymous. They're just ripples of goodness. That's why it's worthwhile to engage in social good during the course of our life, to cause as many good ripples to extend out as possible, and to give up any idea of surviving our death until someone shows otherwise, until the Nobel Prize is given out for whoever it is that can show that there's an afterlife of some sort. And finally, I need to work on those last 2. And finally, the principle of willful time management, making good use of our time through conscious decisions to carefully manage our time, to be more willful in the use of our time. And to that end, I have 2 exercises that I do every day. One, which is the today's thought plan, followed by today's action plan. The thought plan is 4 pieces, pretty simple. Collect my thoughts before breakfast, compose those thoughts over lunch, record them over dinner, before dinner, and then die by bedtime. The death piece is so important in all of this. The ever reminder, always reminding myself that death is just around the corner and is so final, appears to be so final and so complete. Because that's my provocation to action, to live fully now. Sounds so cliche. And now my today's action plan. So I'm about to arrive at the driving school to pick up the car. I'll get my paperwork. I don't think I'll talk about that. Sometimes I need to talk about work, things I'm going to face at work, but I need to keep that stuff private as well. So I think I'll talk about that after I turn off the camera. But I've got challenges. Everybody has challenges in their work, so I got to challenge my way through, find my way through some challenging bits. It's always the case. And then after that, this evening I'll go home, spend time with my family. I already did my exercise. Upload this maybe, and get to bed and die. And I'll leave it at that. I'll just leave you with one more thing. Time is little. There's lots to distract us away from our better life. Lots and lots of stuff that's just fluff and fluff in excess. And I'm starting to recognize that a lot of social media is just that. So the reason I'm hesitating talking is I don't want to sound like I'm giving you, if anybody's watching this, I'm not giving you advice. It's, who am I to tell anybody else what to do? This is advice for me. So I'll change it. I'll look myself in the mirror and say, Kurt, try to get away from the social media. Choose literature instead. Spend your time with the great thoughts and words of my species. Doesn't mean don't be social, but don't fritter away these precious hours on cat photos. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Take care, everybody. Have a good life. Bye-bye.